Welcome back to Politics Nation. At the heart of the tragic shooting of Trayvon Martin lies the question of justice and the conduct of the police. Today, the Sanford, Florida Police Chief Bill Lee issued this explanation, saying, quote, Mr. Zimmerman provided a statement claiming he acted in self-defense. By Florida statute, law enforcement was prohibited from making an arrest. So let me get this straight. A self-appointed neighborhood watchdog arms himself with a 9mm handgun, shoots Trayvon Martin in cold blood, and people let him go because he claims it was self-defense. What about the fact that Zimmerman had an arrest record? What about the fact that a 911 operator, 911 operator told Zimmerman not to pursue? What about the fact that Trayvon's father had to contact police, not the other way around? This is outrageous, and there's too much we still don't know. Joining me now is Zachary Carter, the former U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of New York, first African-American to serve as U.S. Attorney in New York. He's now a partner of the law firm of Dorsey and Whitney. He's so distinguished that in private practice, I've relied on his counsel myself. He's had to help me. What do you make of this self-defense argument, Mr. Carter?
Well, first of all, you don't accept the word, obviously, of a person under investigation that he had a defense of self-defense. That defense has to be supported by evidence, not just the defendant's or the accused's statement, but all the surrounding circumstances. And of course, in this case, where you have 911 tapes, where you have the testimony of neighbors who witnessed various parts of the account and made contemporaneous calls to 911 themselves to report what they had observed, you don't rely on just what the accused has said with respect to their defense of self-defense.
Now, consistent with that is a statement was issued today by the former Republican State Representative Dennis Baxley, who was the one that was behind this law, this Stand Your Ground law. And he issued a statement saying, quote, as the prime sponsor of this legislation in the Florida House, I'd like to clarify that this law does not seem to be applicable to the tragedy that happened in Sanford. So he's using a self-defense law that even the prime sponsor of the law in the state saying it doesn't seem applicable to me. So what is the police chief talking about?
Well, that's hard to fathom. Under the Florida law, you have a right to stand your ground and to retreat in the face of force. But those principles of being able to retreat and stand your ground aren't implicated in a situation where someone is running away from you as opposed to advancing toward you. So that law would not be applicable, at least as I understand the facts, in a situation like this.
Now, you were a prosecutor, you're a federal prosecutor, and handled, among others, the famous Abner Louima case where we were involved in that movement on the outside. And as a prosecutor, if you hear this tape, the operator tells Zimmerman he doesn't have to follow Trayvon Martin. Take this, listen to this.
Sure.
They always get away.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
Now, he's following him. We don't need you to do that. Okay. But then he follows him anyway, and some encounter happens and he kills him. Wouldn't, as a prosecutor, that at least bring into question whether there was self-defense here and you need more than the statement of the shooter in order to back up his claim?
Well, absolutely, because the 911 operator really gave or reinforced the kind of instruction that police agencies almost invariably give to civilian volunteers who are either part of formal or informal neighborhood watch programs, and that is to observe and report, but don't take any direct action. And apparently, either because of his own common sense and professionalism, or because he was trained to do so, this 911 operator, knowing that he was confronting a situation that was unfolding rapidly and could be dangerous, admonished this guy, don't take action, it's not necessary. The fact that he ignored that would be useful evidence that a prosecutor are now analyzing whether or not this person was acting in self-defense or instead put himself in harm's way, or or the potential of it.
Let's bring in Congresswoman Corrine Brown, Democrat from Florida. The shooting happened in her district, and she was a leading voice calling for the Justice Department to investigate. Good evening, Congresswoman Brown.
Hello there, leader.
Now, we are talking with former U.S. Attorney Zach Carter, and the family just left. But you have been very vocal and adamant and helped to bring about the Justice Department to look into this matter. Why, Congresswoman?
Well, because having been involved in it, first of all, there is no great ending. But what we have to do is to really make this a learning experience. And how can we take this and make it not right, but make it fair? And first of all, it can't be fair until the shooter is arrested. That's the first thing. He must be arrested, because as we speak, he still have a permit and a gun. That's unacceptable. Anytime you have a confrontation with the police officer and it's a shooting, that police officer is given desk duty while the investigation is going on. Well, that's not the case. And keep in mind that this shooter was self-appointed.
Yes.
Community watch. They didn't have no official community watch. So in the procedure with the community watch, they tell you, do not follow. Call the police. Stand down. Why did he do that? 5 minutes. This young man was not in the act of doing anything that was incorrect. He was just walking at that point and happened to be black in a neighborhood where he's supposed to be. So what stopped him from waiting for the police officer?
Now, Congresswoman, the commissioner, Sanford City Commissioner, says about the cries for help heard on the tape. I played it in the earlier segment, and the mother of Trayvon says she is sure that is her baby. He says the Sanford Police Department is confident it is not Trayvon Martin crying for help on the tape, that it is George Zimmerman. One, I don't know how she makes that determination based on what. It's a direct contradiction to what the mother said on the show tonight. But can you see why the family and many of your constituents don't have confidence in the local authorities here?
Absolutely, but this is one of the reasons why I want the tape released. You have the tape in hand. You have the wherewithal to have the tape analyzed. And clearly, one of the confidence is that we now have the tape. We don't have the arrest, but we have the tape. We have a full investigation going on with the Justice Department. So basically, we're working on making sure that everything moved forward as we speak. Things that should have happened did not happen. I mean, the young man, Mr. Martin, was tested for drugs, tested for alcohol, but yet the shooter was not tested.
Unbelievable.
There's something wrong with this picture.
Now, Mr. Carter, listen to what a witness says. Let me let you hear what a witness says.
We were in the kitchen. I heard the crying. It was a little boy. As soon as the gun went off, the crying stopped. I firmly believe this was not self-defense. My point is that I feel it was not self-defense because I heard the crying, and if it was Zimmerman that was crying, Zimmerman would have continued crying after the shot went off.
So if you're hearing this again, you're back in your prosecuting days, you have a witness saying that she heard the crying and stopped with the shooting. She does not feel it was Zimmerman. The mother says this, and you're a federal prosecutor looking at local people, local officials saying, we're sure it's Zimmerman. Doesn't this at least raise some level of concern to you?
Well, it raises concern about whether or not the evidence is being fairly evaluated. But one thing I think is important to point out about some of the handicaps and limits of a federal investigation.
Right.
The federal authorities are going to have to prove under the applicable civil rights laws that Zimmerman acted with an intent to deprive Mr. Martin of his civil rights, specifically his right to travel in that area because of his race. And that is a very difficult challenge. It is the equivalent of proving an intentional homicide. By contrast, if the state authorities were to act professionally and responsibly, they'd have a far broader array of charges, from criminal negligence through recklessness, in manslaughter, intentional homicide.
This is the state prosecutor, not the city. Not the
state,
city.
right? The state or the city.
Right.
All right. In other words, under state laws, generally speaking, you have a full array of possible charges, and none of them would require anyone to prove that race was a motive. And I'm sure you may remember that James Farmer, the Civil Rights Act, was famously quoted as saying that in America, that we tend to live in the 51st state when it comes to issues of race, the state of denial. You can imagine what the challenge is for a prosecutor to prove that Zimmerman acted because of a racial bias.
We're going to stay on this, and we're going to have you back to help us through this. Former U.S. Attorney Zachary Carter. Congresswoman Corrine Brown, I'm on my way to your district. I'll see you down there for the rally.
Absolutely. You know, but I have a question for the state attorney. My question is, can the family just go down to the police offices and bring charges against this man and ask to have him arrested?
Well, in most jurisdictions, that would be theoretically possible, but quite frankly, at this stage, and as terrible as it is for the family, for them to believe that the person who killed their son is at liberty, there can be no higher priority than getting this right.
And we're going to make sure that happens. Let me thank both of you for your time. See you at the rally tomorrow night, Congresswoman.
All right, I'll be there.
Coming up, new details about the shooter in the case, George Zimmerman. We'll be right back.